Hello, third grade, and welcome to Topic 2, Lesson 1. Today we're going to be talking about using 2 and 5 as factors. So we're going to be looking at the multiplication facts for 2's and 5's. So we're going to be skip counting through those as we do those multiplication facts. Let's take a look at our video for today. Whoops. Let's head back to our visual learning and watch our video together.
How can you use patterns to multiply by 2 and 5? How many socks are in 7 pairs of socks? Find 7 times 2. You can use doubling to find the number of socks in 7 pairs. Because there are 2 socks in each pair of socks, this can be thought of as 2 groups of 7 socks. 7 plus 7 equals 14. Another way to solve the problem is to skip count by 2's. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. You can also use patterns to find the number of socks in 7 pairs. One pair of socks has 1 times 2, or 2 socks. 2 pairs of socks have 2 times 2, or 4 socks. 3 pairs of socks have 3 times 2, or 6 socks. 7 pairs of socks have 7 times 2, or 14 socks. There are 14 socks in 7 pairs. How many fingers are on 7 gloves? Find 7 times 5. Which number shows the number of fingers on each glove?
Select your answer.
The 7 stands for the number of gloves. The 5 stands for the number of fingers on each glove. You can use skip counting to find the number of fingers on 7 gloves: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. You can also use patterns to find the number of fingers on 7 gloves. 1 times 5 equals 5. 2 times 5 equals 10. 3 times 5 equals 15. 7 times 5 equals 35. There are 35 fingers on 7 gloves.
Use doubling, skip counting, or patterns to answer these questions. How many socks are in 9 pairs? 10 pairs. How many fingers are on 9 gloves? 10 gloves.
Some of the things that we need to pay attention here are we're going to be skip counting, yes, or we could use our doubling. But what we need to pay attention to is the hidden questions that we have sometimes inside of these other questions. So if it tells you how many socks are in 9 pairs, we know that 1 pair, first you have to know how much is in 1 pair of socks. So I know that 1 pair of socks has 2. So if I'm doing 9 pairs of socks, that's either 9 times 2, or using my commutative property that we learned about in our previous unit, I can do 2 times 9. Remember, the product of any 2 factors is the same no matter which order you're multiplying those factors. Now, the same thing with the gloves question. It says, how many fingers are on 9 gloves? Well, the hidden question, the thing that you already need to know before you can solve this, is how many are on 1 glove. So once you figured out that there's 5 fingers on 1 glove, then you can do 9 times 5 or 5 times 9. Same thing with 10 gloves. Now, if we're going to use doubling, we can use doubling for the pairs of socks. In order to do that, let's go ahead and type over here. We can use doubling to figure out how many pairs or how many socks are in 9 or 10 pairs. Now we would do that either by saying 2 groups of 9, because if there's 2 socks in each pair, we could do 2 times 9 to figure out our answer. And we know if we skip count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, we know that's going to give us 18 socks. So that was the same thing as saying 9 plus 9. Now, if we want 10 pairs of socks, we're going to do 2 times 10. And that's going to give us 20, because we know 10 plus 10 equals 20. So that'll take us through the socks question. Now, if we're talking about the gloves, for the gloves, we can use skip counting. So if we're going to skip count with the gloves, we know there are 5 fingers on each glove. That's our missing piece of information that we already know. Now, if I'm going to skip count 9 times to find out how many fingers are on 5, or we're going to skip count 9 times to figure out how many fingers are on 9 gloves, I can skip count by saying 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So I've made 9 jumps over here. So 9 times 5 equals 45. Now, if I'm going to multiply by tens, we already learned the pattern for multiplying by tens in our last, in our previous chapter. But we know that anytime we're multiplying something by 10, we're just putting a 0 onto the end of it. So just like we did the 2 times 10 for the socks, we added a 0 onto the end of the 2, and that made it 20. But since we said we're going to use skip counting for this, we're going to continue skip counting in order to find our answer here. So we already know that times 9 got us to 45, plus 5 more will get us to 50. So we know that 10 times 5 equals 50. So for my first one, I used doubling. For my second one, I used skip counting. All right, we're going to jump ahead and get into our guided practice questions. Now, for our guided practice questions, our first one says, explain how you can use doubling to find 2 times 8. Number 2 says, Bert says 9 times 2 is 19. How can you use patterns to show that Bert's answer is wrong? And then for numbers 3, 4, and 5, we're going to be working on multiplication. Now, while we were listening to everything, I did make some notes that I want you guys to have down in your notebooks. Now, we know that we're going to be working with things that we call multiples. Now, the products or the answers of a number and another whole number are called multiples. So the multiples are the numbers that we're going to multiply together, or the answers for when we multiply together. So multiples of 2 and 5 are the multiplication facts for the 2 times table and the multiplication facts for the 5 times table. So when you're skip counting by 2, you're looking at multiples of 2. If you're skip counting by 5, you're looking at multiples of 5. So when we multiply, we're going to skip count by a number. So I put all of my 2's facts over here and my 5's facts over here. 0 times 2 is 0. 1 times 2 is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so on, so on, so on. Now, what you notice about the numbers, I underlined the ones place in my 2 times table. So it goes 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 0, and then it's going to keep going, 2, 4, 6, 8, 0. It's going to keep following that pattern. So first we had nothing in the tens place, and then we had ones in the tens place, and then we'll have twos in the tens place, and then threes, and so on. When you're skip counting by fives, your ones place is always going to be 0 or 5. So 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. So your number in your ones place is always going to be either a 0 or a 5. That's how you know right away if it's part of the 5 times tables. Now, things that we need to remember. Multiples for 2 are what you get when you skip count by 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. Multiples of 5s are when you skip count by 5s. They always end with, remember, a 5 or a 0. You can also use doubling to find the product. Remember, the product means the answer of a multiplication question. You can always use doubling to find the product of 2 and a whole number by doubling. So 2 times 5 or 5 times 2, you can always do it as 5 plus 5 because we know there's 2 groups. Double the 5s to find the product of 2 times 5. So 2 times 5 is the same thing as saying 5 plus 5, which is 10. So 2 times 5 is going to equal 10. Now we're going to get into our guided practice. The first question says, how can we use doubling to find the product of 2 times 8? So we know that 2 times 8 is the same thing as saying 8 plus 8, right? That means 2 groups of 8. So we know that 8 plus 8 is 16. So 2 times 8 also equals 16. For question number 2, it says, how do we know 2 times 9 is not equal to 19? And what can we use to help us prove that answer? So we know 2 times 9 is not equal to 19 because if we skip count by 2 9 times, we'll get to 18. And if we double the 9s, we use the doubling strategy. 9 plus 9 is 18. So we know that Bert's answer is wrong. It's close, but it's not the right answer. All right, for this next question, for number 3, we have to fill in the missing numbers. So we wanted to find how much 2 times 4 is. So we're going to take a look at the patterns that we know and that we saw when we were working with skip counting by 2s. So we know that 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 3 is then going to give us 6. 2 times 4, that's going to be another group of 2. That's going to give us 8. So we know that 2 times 4 is equal to 8. So notice our skip counting, 2, 4, 6, 8. And if we were to keep going, it would be 10, 12, 14, 16, and so on. Now, when you multiply, you can also stack them on top of each other like this. Now, remember, you're always stacking the same place values on top of each other. So the ones are always on top of the ones. The tens are always on top of the tens. The hundreds are always on top of the hundreds. You always start lining them up from the ones place, and then you move to the bigger ones. So 8 times 2 is the same thing as saying 2 groups of 8. And we know that 2 groups of 8, which is the same thing as saying 8 plus 8. We know that is equal to 16 from our doubling facts. For number 5, we have 5 times 8. So we know if we have 5 groups of 8, we're going to skip count 8 times. We can skip count 8 times by 5 because we know how to skip count by 5. So that one's easy. We can go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we know that our answer is going to be 40 because we skip counted by 5s 8 times. So this lesson is fairly easy to follow. Skip counting is a thing that you guys have been doing for a long time now, so it should be easy for you guys to follow through. Remember our commutative property that says that we can switch the order of the numbers that we're working with, right? We're not taking away a number, we're not putting in a new number, we're just changing them around. So 5 times 8 is the same thing as 8 times 5. 8 times 2 is the same thing as 2 times 8. If you have any questions, let me know, 3rd grade. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing day. Take care. Bye-bye.